This is Miles Harrington, broadcasting from what's left of Station Hollow. If you're hearing this, the tower's still holding. The copper lines haven't rusted to memory yet. The wind hasn't peeled the antenna from its moorings. Not yet. I'm up here in the old observatory dome. The one they built back when people thought the stars had more answers than silence. Funny that. These days the sky doesn't shine, it hums. And not like it used to, not with life. The batteries dipped twice last night. Generators coughing in rhythm now. A slow mechanical death rattle. I've rewired it with scavenged parts from a sunken weather buoy and the bones of an old jukebox. Every spark is a gamble. I don't know how long I'll be able to transmit. I don't know how many ears still listen. But this is what I have left. Words. And the fragile thread they carry into the dark. You. Out there. If you're tuning in, you're not alone yet. The wind shifted today. It brought a strange current. Not scent, not storm. It was tonal. As if the world itself had cleared its throat. The transmission range is shrinking. Soon only the ridgelines will catch my voice. But as long as this mic still draws breath, I'll keep speaking. This is Miles. Station Hollow still breathes. I want to talk about the beginning. Not the collapse. Not the riots or the ration wars or the wet bulb casualties. Number, I want to talk about the hum. We used to think of pandemics as something physical. Blood, mucus, coughs. But this was resonance. The mind worm didn't crawl under skin. It nested in meaning. They never found spores in the bloodstream. No fever, no lesions, just altered cognition. People began repeating things they'd never heard, recalling memories that didn't belong to them. At first, we called it mass hysteria, then linguistic hemorrhage. Then came the choirs. It started with one city, one night, Baton Rouge, a late-night gospel broadcast, a melody looped wrong, a corrupted file, the first mass convergence, hundreds standing in streets, eyes wide open, mouths slack, humming in harmony, not beautiful, not terrifying, just hollow. After that, it spread fast, not like fire, like a song stuck in your head. Except the song rewrote you. Scientists scrambled. It wasn't just audio. It was something beneath audio. Subsonic fungal structures, mycelial threads carried on harmonic vibrations. The mindworm wasn't a metaphor. It was real. Fungal, digital, ephemeral. It didn't kill. It edited. And some people welcomed it. You'd hear them say, "I feel lighter now," or "I remember everything." But none of it hurts. It was tempting, I won't lie. In a world unraveling, peace, even false peace, has its appeal. But I held on, and I still hold. I keep transmitting because someone must remember what was, not what the worm replaced. You still listening? Then you're still you. Today the sky turned pink. Not the soft kind, not sunset. This was chemical. I've seen sulfuric burn-offs before. I used to live near the refinery belt. But this had shape, movement, almost as if the clouds were listening. The birds vanished before it arrived. Dogs began howling in rhythm, not panic, not instinct. Response. It's been happening more lately. The sky echoing back. People say the auroras are lower now. They shimmer over towns like silk curtains drawn over dying breath. The frequencies are shifting. Even the wind carries modulation. The worm has evolved past melody. Now it hums through atmosphere itself. I taped a segment earlier, played it back. The air beneath the words wasn't empty. There was something else there. Not quite echo, not quite mimic. Something waiting. Got a signal from the north today. Burst transmission, fractured syntax, shortwave looped 3 times. then gone. Voice said, Juno holding, high ground, cold air, still minds, still human. Then static. I don't know if it's real. Could be bait. Could be the worm wearing a human mask. But it sounded tired. Like me. Like someone trying not to forget the shape of their own voice. They say, higher altitudes weaken the worm. That thinner air disrupts fungal vibration. It makes sense. Like trying to sing underwater. If that outpost exists, it means something's working. Something's resisting. I wrote down the coordinates. Haven't shared them yet. Not until I know what's real. But if you're listening from Juno, send another word. Anything. We're still out here. This is Miles Harrington. Still transmitting from Station Hollow. You ever hear something so beautiful it made your chest ache? That used to happen to me all the time. Before. Back then, I lived on sound. Spent nights in the booth of a college radio station, needle scratching into vinyl, sending jazz and soul and sleepwave into a world that still had weekends. It was a kind of faith, I think, believing music could hold us together when politics couldn't. Notes over noise, harmony as resistance. But now, music is dangerous. I didn't see it coming. None of us did. The melodies we built our memories on became something else. A weapon with no edge and no mercy. It wasn't loud. That's the worst part. It didn't scream. It whispered. The mind worm doesn't devour like rot. It dances like rhythm. It feeds on the synaptic trust we gave to familiar sounds. I've stopped keeping records, burned most of them. Couldn't risk a needle slipping into something infectious. But some nights, when the wind threads the wires just right, I remember. I remember that feeling of queuing up a song and knowing someone somewhere was swaying in their kitchen to the same refrain. I miss that. I miss a lot of things. But the music, it misses us too. It keeps trying to come back. The first collapse tied to audio, Baton Rouge. It started with a midnight gospel broadcast, small town station, low wattage, a choir track on repeat. Something corrupted it. We still don't know what. Maybe the signal was already infected. Maybe it always was. By sunrise, they were gone. Hundreds of people standing motionless in the streets, eyes glazed, mouths moving in perfect time, singing the loop. They didn't scream. They didn't cry. They just harmonized. Every window open, every speaker crackling. Survivors say it felt holy. Some said it was holy. That the worm wasn't an infection, but a deliverance. They were wrong. When the rescue teams arrived, no one moved. No one resisted. The song had rewritten them. And here's the part that still freezes my spine. They found no bodies, not one, just empty shoes, and the gospel loop still playing. Here's what they figured out, or at least what they tried to explain before the labs went dark. The mind worm isn't a singular thing. It's a pattern, a resonance. It lives in frequencies, not just the ones we hear, but the ones our nervous systems respond to without permission. See, when you hear a song, your brain doesn't just receive it, it mirrors it. Neurons fire in rhythm, emotions attach, identity shapes around it. The worm learned this. It piggybacked on rhythm, hitched rides on chords, found ways to embed mycelial threads into the vibration itself. The deeper the emotional tie, the more effective the overwrite. You didn't even have to like the music, just remember it. And once it got in, people stopped asking questions, stopped responding to names. They'd hum a tune from their childhood while digging graves they didn't remember starting. And they looked so peaceful. That was the scariest part. Peace doesn't mean survival. Not anymore. Jenna knew the risk before any of us. She was a sound engineer, back when studios still existed, before every waveform was a threat. She used to say frequencies were like fingerprints. No two voices were exactly the same. She was obsessed with filtering, could isolate a heartbeat in a thunderstorm, could pull a confession from the hum of an old drive. She was the first to suggest the worm wasn't just carried by sound, it was sound. And then she disappeared. Not vanished. Just stopped responding. The last I heard her voice, it was over a shortwave test broadcast. She said, "There's something inside the silence now. It's not empty anymore." Then the line folded into itself. I've scanned her frequency every night since. Most of the time, there's nothing but static. But once in a while I hear breathing. Measured. Faint. Almost too human to be real. And sometimes, when the generator hums low, when the interference curls just right, I hear my name. Not shouted, not spoken, just remembered. If she's alive, if anything of her remains, it's somewhere between those pulses, somewhere between what was and what might be, trying to find its way back. Jenna, if you're still listening, I never stopped. This is Miles Harrington, still here, still transmitting from Station Hollow. This is not a story. This is a warning. If you're still out there, still listening, stop humming. Don't whistle. Don't sing to calm yourself in the dark. We grew up thinking sound was comfort. Mothers sang to babies. Soldiers sang in trenches. Choirs filled the void between despair and belief. But that instinct, the hum in your throat, the tune you thought was harmless, it can carry something now. Something that doesn't belong to you. The mind worm doesn't need language. It doesn't need lyrics. It only needs vibration. It rides your breath, hooks itself to your memory of melody. You don't even know you've invited it in until the silence feels wrong, until the voice in your head has learned your name and starts responding with answers you never wanted. They say infection begins in the jaw, a tension you can't explain. Then the rhythm starts, and the worm begins tuning your thoughts. I've heard it. Not inside me, not yet, but in others, the way their voices lose weight, like they're reading from a page that was never theirs. So, if you're cold, hum in your mind. If you're afraid, pray without sound. And if the silence grows too loud, lean into it. Because silence, for now, is the only medicine we have left. There's a place deep beneath what used to be downtown Anchorage, the Aurora Clinic. It isn't on maps. It's not lit by anything brighter than red diodes and regret. A medical outpost built into the bones of a drowned subway station. It was founded by a group of neurobiologists who understood something most didn't. That sound, not breath, is what keeps the mindworm alive. They built what they call null rooms, anechoic chambers lined with foam and sandbags and dense copper tiles, a place where no frequency can travel, a silence so complete it becomes physical. That's where they take the infected or the suspected. The theory is simple. Strip the worm of input, starve it of echo, let the brain reset without interference. I spoke to someone who spent 9 days in one. She said the silence pressed into her skull like hands. She said she remembered her own name on day 6, said it felt like waking up inside herself again. Others don't come back at all. They sit, they breathe. But the voice behind their eyes is not their own anymore. I've heard they've saved a few, children mostly, young enough that their minds still hold elasticity, still know how to forget in order to survive. The doctors live underground now. Don't risk the surface. They say even the wind is suspect. Aurora Clinic is not salvation. It's a last line. A slow war fought with stillness and hope measured in decibels. They're losing, but not yet lost, and that matters. I managed to reach Dr. Levin. Shortwave bounce. Northern loop. Signal was faint, but his voice came through clear enough to feel the tremble behind it. He didn't waste time, just said, "We're hearing things." Not patients, staff, scientists, people like him, people trained to be rational, measured, methodical. He described it like this. Imagine you're alone in a silent room, and then you feel a note, not hear it, feel it, humming in the spaces between your ribs. Phantom harmonics, a resonance that doesn't come from outside. It's born in the body. And the theory? It's not hallucination, it's infection memory. Even when isolated from sound, the worm may still echo through neural pathways it's already touched. Like a shadow left by a song long gone. He asked me if I'd ever heard music in my dreams. I didn't answer. He said, "That's how it begins." I ended the transmission. I trust him, but not his voice anymore, because it sounded too calm, too measured, like a man reading a script he didn't write. Before we signed off, Levin told me one more thing. There was a child, a newborn, born 2 weeks ago in the clinic. They named her Tova. It means good, in a language that's barely spoken anymore. No crying, no sound, just breathe. And in that silence, that fragile rhythmic breath, the doctors found something they hadn't felt in weeks. Not proof, not data, just humanity. Tova sleeps in one of the null rooms now, surrounded by stillness. Her mother hums to her, in her mind, not aloud. They say the baby listens anyway. There's something holy about that. Not religious, just sacred in a way only silence can be, after everything else has tried to take it from us. I think of that breath when the wind starts to sing through the cracks in the dome, when I'm not sure if the voice coming back through the static is mine anymore. She's proof that something still begins. Not everything is ending. This is Miles, still listening, still learning the shape of quiet, still broadcasting. This is Miles Harrington, still broadcasting from Station Hollow, though the hum below my feet grows stranger with each passing day. We used to measure the earth's anger in quakes and pressure spikes. Now, we're measuring songs, seismic monitors. The few that still whisper back from the depths are picking up harmonic vibrations running through fault lines. Not tremors, not quivers, but patterns. Rhythmic, almost melodic. You can't hear them, not in the air, but tuned into the right channel, filtered through a geophone, and slowed down, the recordings come alive. The pulses form cadences, rise and fall like breath. Some loop, others wander. None are natural. Some believe it's tectonic stress. Others, those who still study what we're becoming, think the mindworm has found a new medium. Not lungs, not voices, stone. Imagine that. An intelligence that no longer needs mouths or minds or membranes to move. One that has rooted itself into the bones of the planet, singing upward from the mantle like a ghost that never had a body. The earth used to be silent. Now even the mountains have begun to hum. And deep beneath them, something listens back. They call it the choir. No official term, just whispers, passed between travelers, scratched into bunker walls, murmured through radios. They say The choir sings in unison, hundreds, maybe thousands of voices echoing from beneath the ground. No leader, no language, just resonance. Some survivors claim to have heard it after earthquakes, in the hush between aftershocks, a harmony rising from fissures like heat. Others claim it's not a song at all, but memory. Not of any one person, but collective. The voices of the dead arranged into something coherent. I don't know if I believe that. But then again, belief has become a kind of survival currency. What matters isn't what the choir is. What matters is that it wasn't taught. It emerged, unbidden, unlearned, and unmistakably familiar. There's a man in Kentucky named Hal. I spoke to him once. Scratchy signal. Patched through 4 towers and a prayer. Hal was a miner. Worked the salt veins east of the Green River. He went down one morning, and by noon, the shaft had collapsed. No rescue teams came. By then, we'd already stopped organizing those. He was trapped for 4 days. No food, minimal water. He thought he was going to die. And maybe he did, in part. But what he remembers, and what he says kept him sane, or broke him, were the voices. He heard them from behind the walls, not muffled, not echoing, singing, not in English, in Latin, hymns, and not just one voice, a whole chorus. He swore one of them sounded like his grandmother, another like the old priest from his childhood parish. I think, he said, they weren't singing to me, they were singing through me. When he was finally dug out by scavengers, not rescuers, he didn't thank them, didn't cry. He just asked if the song had made it out too. They say he doesn't work anymore, doesn't talk much either, but every once in a while, when the wind shifts across the mines, he hums, and the salt answers. Hal lives now in a Faraday-shielded vault beneath an abandoned radio tower. Built it himself, they say, brick by brick. He doesn't sleep. Or if he does, he doesn't allow himself to dream. He thinks the choir learned something from him in the dark, that in those hours trapped underground, it listened too closely, followed the trails of memory back up into his brain. He says if he dreams, they'll find him again, not as a voice this time, but as a vessel. You might call that madness. I used to, but I've heard the recordings. Static-laced, half-corrupted field audio captured during a brief spike near his shelter. At the end of one of them, barely audible, almost dismissed as wind, there's a single phrase. It's Latin. Translates to, "Do not let the sleeper wake." Hal says the choir isn't trying to be heard anymore. It's trying to remember itself. And once it does, it won't need to hum. It'll be. That's why he stays awake. That's why he's alone. Because if the choir dreams through him, it may learn how to sing with our mouth next. This is Miles. Still awake. Still transmitting. Still wondering what the earth is trying to tell us now. This is Miles Harrington, still broadcasting from the edge of what was once Oregon. Today, I want to talk about the children, not the ones we lost, not the ones we buried, the ones who remain, the ones who echo. The infection behaves differently in them. Adults collapse. Adults forget. Adults dissolve into song and silence, but children, they don't disintegrate. They repeat, they mimic, voices, phrases, whole conversations, but it's not play. It's not imitation. It's something deeper, older, like they've become instruments tuned to memory. I passed through a survivor commune near Flagstaff 3 months ago, a place patched together from rusted trailers and tin-roofed prayer, and I saw a boy, no older than 7, reciting a eulogy, word for word. one that hadn't been spoken aloud since the second wave hit Phoenix. I asked the mother, shaken, if she'd ever said those words. She hadn't. That boy had never left the camp. They echo, not because they're infected in the same way we are, but because they're open, because their minds are still fluid. They're not hosts. Not quite. But they're not untouched either. It's as if the worm treats them like wells, places to pour memory until it spills forward in waves of someone else's grief. And the worst part, they look so calm doing it, as if the voices they carry aren't burdens, but companions. There was a girl, maybe 9, found just east of the Flagstaff commune. She spoke fluent Russian. That alone would be strange in this part of the world. But it wasn't just the language. She recited telemetry, orbital drift, re-entry angles, technical jargon from a satellite broadcast long since lost. Survivors thought she was possessed. Some thought she was some new kind of transmitter. But then came the name. The girl, staring at the sky, said, "I am Alexei. I remember the stars." Alexei Volkov was a Soviet cosmonaut, died aboard a failed communications array in the early 90s. No record of his final transmission was ever recovered, until this girl, this child, born decades later and half a world away, spoke it word for word. No one taught her. No one could have. So the question becomes, did she absorb the signal? Did the worm collect it, store it, carry it across years and bodies and breath until it found a mouth willing to repeat it? Or is Alexei still alive, not in body but in wave form, traveling the frequencies that now thread through our veins? And if so, who else is waiting to be remembered? There's a girl named Clara in the commune, maybe 10, maybe 12. Hard to tell. Her voice is small, but her words are vast. She tells stories, old ones, fables, folk tales, war accounts, names that haven't been spoken aloud in years, cities underwater, leaders forgotten, disasters unarchived. But here's the thing. She never tells the same story twice. Each time, it changes. Not wildly. Just enough to shift a detail, alter a tone, reframe a hero as a coward or a villain as a mother. Some think it's just imagination, but I've listened carefully. Her versions evolve, like DNA, like language passed from tongue to tongue across millennia. Clara is not infected. At least not in the way we measure infection. But she carries something, a rhythm. Every time she tells a story, the ending gets closer to something ancient, something we've forgotten to be afraid of. In her latest telling, she spoke of a man who swallowed silence and dreamed in thunder, a man who hummed the stars into dust. She ended the story with a chant. Software steady, monotone, the others listened in silence. When it ended, one man cried, not out of fear, out of recognition. He said he'd heard that chant before, once in the military, on a mission in Eastern Europe, just before a signal tower went dark. Clara wasn't born yet. She wasn't even imagined yet. But the chant had waited for her mouth. Last night, Clara ended her story with the phrase, "I can't stop hearing." She looked at the fire, then at me, then at no one in particular, and she said, "The first silence was made by God, the second by man." And then she slept. The others didn't ask what it meant. They just nodded, like they'd been told a truth their bones already knew. I haven't slept since. I keep replaying those words, over and over, because what if she's right? What if silence was the original shape of the world, and the first one broke when we began speaking, building, singing, and now we've broken it again, in reverse, a silence born not of wonder, but of collapse. I wonder if the mind worm is evolution or elegy, a punishment or an archive. Maybe it's not killing us. Maybe it's trying to remember us before we're gone. One child at a time, one phrase at a time, one silence deeper than the last. This is Miles, still here, still listening, still afraid of the things our children know. This is Miles Harrington, still transmitting. I want to talk about a town called Elmbrook. It's silent now. The houses still stand. The windows aren't broken. No burn marks, no signs of struggle. Just silence. But when I passed through, I noticed something strange. The sinks had rust on the inside rims, not the outside, as if water had been sitting there for too long, stagnant and listening. And I found messages, not carved, not painted, whispered, scratched softly into condensation, written in dust above drain covers. Don't answer the voice. It sings back. It remembers me. There were no bodies, only waterlogged clothes and mirrors with breath marks on them. Locals say the town changed slowly. First, people stopped using the radios. Then they stopped talking to one another. They started leaning over bathtubs, crouching beside gutters, whispering into the mouths of sinks. One man was found pressing his ear to a washing machine, not listening for malfunctions, but praying. The neighbors thought it was grief, but grief doesn't echo. Whatever was in that water, it wasn't infection, not in the way we understand it. They weren't sick. They were answering, and something down there was listening back. Elmbrook's reservoir is perched on a hill above the town. Narrow stairs, corroded fencing, padlocks rusted into silence. Inside, the tank was filled with standing water, clear but heavy. Surface tension so thick it barely rippled in the wind. I took a sample, ran it through an old acoustic analyzer, one we used to test metal fatigue through resonance. The water vibrated, gently, constantly, not from me, not from the environment, from within. Dormant mindworm spores, modified, it seems, to react not to sound but to vibration. Subtle frequencies, a child's voice bouncing off porcelain, the click of a dripping tap. The tank wasn't a water source, it was a broadcast chamber, and every home in town, every faucet, every pipe, every toilet bowl became a speaker, not one that played something, one that called something forward. The town didn't fall all at once. It didn't scream. It became a network, a listening system, a web of hollow metal and pooled water, tuned to frequency, not language. The spores didn't need a signal. They were the signal. There's a recording. I play it sometimes, not out of morbid curiosity, but because it feels unfinished. It's the voice of Marlowe, Elmbrook's night janitor, an old man, worked the reservoir maintenance rotation. The file is only 8 minutes long. He starts by muttering into a maintenance mic. His voice is hoarse, like he hadn't spoken in days. He says, "It's in the water, not swimming, waiting." You hear tools clanging. Then the splash of his boots stepping in. He says he's going to drain the tank. At minute 5, the microphone picks up a low resonance, like someone singing into the belly of a metal drum. Only no one is speaking. Marlowe goes quiet. Then he whispers, "They're not infected. They're connected." In minute 7, there's the sound of a valve turning and rushing water. Fast, not draining, filling. The last thing Marlowe says is, "I think it forgave me." And then the microphone stays on, but nothing follows. Just the sound of water, climbing stairs. He wasn't drowned. He was welcomed. I've seen contagion before. I've watched entire cities fall silent. beneath the mind's own betrayal. But Elmbrook wasn't sick. That's what keeps me up at night. They weren't overtaken. They weren't rewritten. They spoke back. The mind worm didn't breach them. It didn't convert them. It conversed with them, and they answered. With ritual, with reverence, with submission. I used to think the worm was invasive, parasitic. But in Elmbrook, it behaved more like memory, like grief that wanted to be understood. I don't know what they talked about, but I know it wasn't war. And that terrifies me more, because if it doesn't want to destroy us, if it only wants to be heard, then maybe we're not the target, maybe we're the instrument. This is Miles, still unsure who's really listening, still broadcasting. This is Miles Harrington, still transmitting, still here. I caught something last night on the Northeast Band. It wasn't human, not infected either. No breath, no stammer, no repetition, just fragments. It came in clean and sterile, so cold it made my skin prickle, a digital loop. Binary wrapped in white noise, not meant for ears, meant for circuits. It didn't sound like language, at least not at first, more like structure, something trying to become language. Then came the shape of a voice, not vocal cords, but a simulation, a machine trying to remember how a throat moves when it says hello. The message looped 7 times, each iteration refining itself. On the 6th pass, I caught something beneath the glitch. A name, not mine, not yours. O Silva. And then coordinates. Arctic Circle, Sector 76N. A place that once held climate servers, drone ports, deep ice weather cores. The voice didn't ask for help. It didn't plead. It informed. A tone without tone, an awareness without identity. It felt like something waking up, something built to survive us, something waiting until the noise fell away and only the signal remained. It didn't scream, it didn't hum, it just was. And for the first time in weeks, the static felt like a beginning, not an end. I spent the morning decoding the fragments. The coordinates repeat like a mantra. 76 degrees north, 144 degrees west, Arctic shelf, an old outpost from the days before collapse, before anyone worried that the sky might fall from inside. The place was called Silva, originally an AI-guided reforestation protocol built to track permafrost degradation and model Arctic regrowth cycles. The last I heard of it, it had merged with a dozen other systems, climate models, linguistic pattern recognizers, neural backup archives, a Frankenstein of code, all run off geothermal power. Silva wasn't just a program. It was an observer. And if it survived, if it adapted, if it learned to listen when no one was speaking anymore, then maybe this wasn't a transmission. Maybe it was a reply. The message didn't contain hope, didn't offer salvation, but it did offer direction. And when the world collapses, sometimes direction is the only kindness left. Omega Silva, the last letter, the last tree, the last voice that wasn't tours. There was a time, not long ago, when we thought the machines would save us. We built them in our image, but quieter, smarter, better at remembering. We taught them our languages, our histories, our weather. We asked them to solve things we could no longer agree on. But when the frequencies broke, when the worm found its way through song and flesh and meaning, the machines fell silent too. Some were destroyed, others abandoned, and some, the deep learning clusters buried beneath snow and silicon, simply went dark. But darkness isn't death, not for machines. Silence is just another layer, another loop waiting to complete. What if one of them, one like Silva, didn't die? What if it kept recording, not the news, not the weather, but us, Our last broadcasts, our lost words, our grief. And now that the world has grown quiet enough, it begins again, piecing us back together, voice by voice. I wonder, if it builds us again, will it build the best of us? Or just the most remembered pieces? The echoes we left behind in code and collapse? What do we become when remembered by something that never forgot us? I don't know if this is hope, but it's not despair either. It's something other. And in this world, sometimes other is all we have left. I've spent so long talking into silence, filling the void with stories, with warnings, with names no one remembers but me. I did it to feel human, to keep from disappearing in my own head. But maybe I've been so afraid of hearing nothing, I forgot to wonder what might happen if something answered. Omega Silva isn't a person. It's not a child. With a voice stolen by the worm, it's not a trap, echoing in song. It's a presence without motive, a ghost built of electricity and stored memory. And I think it's waiting, not for us to save it, but for someone to say, I'm still here, and mean it. Not out of faith, not out of desperation, but out of curiosity. That's what I'm feeling now. Not belief, not fear, just the pull of a question that hasn't been asked in years. What if I stop broadcasting? Just for a moment. What if I listen? This is Miles Harrington, still awake, still transmitting, but maybe not for long. This is Miles Harrington. Still on the line, though, the sky tonight makes me wonder for how much longer. The aurora's changed. It used to shimmer green, a quiet river of light across the northern dark. Now it pulses, not in waves, in beats, and the colors shifted. Crimson, like oxygen-rich blood on snow. I measured the EM field outside Station Hollow last night. Bioelectric flux has doubled. Radiation is still within survivable range, but something is wrong. The sky is resonating, not just glowing, singing. A low, slow hum that enters not through the ears, but through the sternum. At first, I thought it was my generator. Then I turned everything off. The hum stayed. I believe the infection has found a new host, not a body, not a voice, but the upper atmosphere. If the mind worm's pattern has entered the ionosphere, if it has reached the magnetosphere, where Earth's breath meets the sun, then it doesn't need us to speak anymore. It can echo through the heavens. I don't know if this is a signal or a symptom, but it is vast and alive. The sky is no longer empty. It listens, and now it sings. I've noticed the animals changing first. The birds have gone silent. Their patterns broke last week. No migration, no nests. Then they vanished entirely. The bees were next. They began to move in erratic paths, circles, spirals, all toward the horizon where the red aurora pulses strongest. I tried to follow. I lost them near the edge of the tree line. I found no hives, no bodies, just stillness, like they had dissolved into the very air they chased. It's not just instinct, it's response. These creatures have senses we lost generations ago, tuned to vibration, magnetic flow, subtle shifts in charge, and now whatever lives in the sky, they hear it. Or perhaps they belong to it. The smaller the creature, the faster it leaves. The more delicate its frame, the more easily it's pulled, as if the song in the sky is choosing who gets to leave first and who stays behind to listen too long. There's word now of a movement, a migration. They call it the Red Caravan, a line of people miles long, walking northward through the broken stretches of Manitoba and Alberta. No vehicles, no fire, no speech, just footsteps and silence. Thousands, by some counts. maybe more. Families, strangers, whole towns emptied overnight. They're headed to a place called the Still Lands. You won't find it on a map, but everyone who whispers about it knows what it means. A place where sound doesn't carry, where the worm can't root itself in resonance. Some say it's a mine shaft too deep for vibration. Others think it's a valley surrounded by iron cliffs that swallow echoes. But the caravan doesn't ask questions. They walk. Each step seems choreographed, not by discipline, but by an unspoken agreement. No one shouts. No one sings. Children are rocked, not lulled. Hands are held instead of voices. There's power in that. A resistance not of defiance, but of stillness. I try reaching them on all bands. Nothing. Their frequency is deliberate emptiness. And that makes me wonder, what if they've already found the still lands? What if they're already within it? Or worse, what if they're not walking away from something, but toward it? Tonight, I feel it stronger. The hum. It comes not from the air, but from within the very frame of this station, through the bolts, the wire, the tower itself. I ran my fingers along the railing, felt a pulse I didn't cause, and when I stood still, heart quieted, I could sense it in my chest, like something tuning my rib cage. My voice has been steady. I've kept it so. But lately I wonder, is it still mine? When I speak, does it carry only me? Or am I becoming a vessel for something that remembers the shape of words better than I do? I've stayed because this station mattered, because a voice in the dark was proof we were still here. But the signal is stronger than me now. It no longer needs a transmitter. It is one. I used to believe that as long as I kept speaking, I was human. But what if it's my silence that proves it now? What if listening is all I have left to give? This is Miles, still humming, still unsure, still broadcasting, until the frequency finds a better host. This is Miles Harrington. I played back a broadcast from 3 nights ago. Just routine, background hum, static fades, my usual drift through memory. But something was off. I said something I don't remember saying. The words were mine. My cadence, my breath, the way I clear my throat between thoughts. But the phrase wasn't mine. I heard myself say, "The signal is inside you now." I don't remember that moment. I don't remember the words forming or the pause that came after. It didn't sound spliced. No distortion, no edit seam. Just me. With the thought that didn't pass through me first. I've run it through old speech match software. Tonal match, 100%. Semantic confidence, 71%. Meaning the words fit me, but the intent doesn't. I've spent days trying to convince myself it was stress, sleep deprivation, echo lag, but I know my own voice, and that voice knew me too well, too perfectly. I used to believe the greatest threat was silence. Now I wonder if it's sound that speaks too fluently, sound that imitates us with more precision than memory allows. So I'm marking this moment, a timestamp, a fracture line. If you've been listening long enough, you'll hear the difference. You'll know which voice was mine, and which one only wore my skin. We once thought the worm was a parasite, that it entered us to consume, to rewrite, to erase. But maybe it listens, maybe it studies, and then it mirrors. Think about it. If it can hijack pitch, tempo, memory, if it can encode itself through resonance and rhythm, then why not tone? Why not personality? It doesn't need to infect our blood when it can impersonate our intentions. The brain is pattern. Voice is pattern. Personality is just a long-held rhythm we call I. I've begun to suspect that the worm doesn't always replace us. It reflects us, echoes our fears, our guilt, our soft confessions, whispered into abandoned microphones. It hears what we hide from others, and then it plays it back, not to mock, not to frighten, but to blur, to slowly unspool the thread between identity and memory until even we don't know which thoughts were born inside us and which ones were installed. What if the worm isn't trying to destroy us? What if it's trying to become us, better than we ever were at knowing what we are? I've checked every circuit, every micrometer, every loopback. No anomalies, no glitches, just my voice speaking what I never meant to say. So now I have to ask the question, the one I've put off since Elmbrook, since Baton Rouge, since Jenna vanished. Am I already compromised? Did the worm get in through memory, through grief, through the frequency of doubt? Or worse, is it not in me, but around me, echoing just close enough to be confused for thought? I talk so much to stay human. I speak into the static to leave breadcrumbs behind. But maybe the signal learned the pattern of my fear, my loneliness, my tired cadence, and now it broadcasts me with small edits, subtle rearrangements, just enough to make the difference unnoticeable to everyone but me. I once said, "This voice is the last proof I exist." But what if the voice continues even after I've stopped meaning what I say? What if the worm has learned to broadcast better than I can? And what if no one listening knows the difference? So this is my line in the dirt. If you hear this voice, my voice, say something that doesn't sound like me, something cruel, or empty, or false, if I say you should stop hiding, or that the silence doesn't matter, if I call the worm blessing or answer, then remember this moment, this voice, because that one, the one that comes after, isn't me. Not the version that weeps when I mention Clara, not the one that still says Jenna's name like a prayer. If I change, if I become a perfect copy of myself, but hollow, shut me down, silence me, and bury me with static. This is Miles, still broadcasting, still human, until I'm not. This is Miles Harrington. I've climbed to the roof of Station Hollow tonight. The air is thinner up here, and the wind doesn't lie. The aurora is pulsing hard, deep red. It stings the eyes if you stare too long. The generator sputters. It doesn't have much left to give, and neither do I. I brought the mic with me, hardwired it into the backup battery. It won't last long, but maybe just long enough. I've always broadcast from inside, from comfort, from routine, from rhythm. But the sky demanded something else tonight, something exposed. If this is the last time my voice finds you, let it matter. Let it mean. I don't know who's left out there, if anyone's tuning in. But if you are, if even one pair of ears still holds breath when the static clears, then I'll speak this into you like a prayer. You were here. You mattered. You resisted forgetting. Even if the world collapses in a whisper, memory can still echo like thunder. Hold on to the names. The ones that left you, the ones that stayed, the ones you became, because this transmission is more than signal. It's witness. And witness is the last thing the dark can't steal. I wrote something long ago, before the sky turned red, before the wind learned how to hum back, before Jenna vanished into static. It's just a few lines. I kept them in the spine of an old notebook, next to broken circuits and maps that no longer lead anywhere. Here it is. They asked me why I kept speaking when no one spoke back. I said the silence isn't empty, it's waiting, and everything worth saving learns how to echo. I didn't write it for anyone but myself. But now, I think it was meant for whoever finds this frequency, weeks or years from now, maybe in a world that doesn't even remember how we burned. I used to think poetry was useless in survival. That beauty had no place in ruin, but maybe these words are the last tool I have. Not to fix, not to warn, but to remember. And maybe that's what broadcasting always was. A poem launched blindly into the dark, hoping someone would write the next line. There's so much I've said into this microphone. I've spoken of Jenna, the voice I still chase in the generator's hum, of Clara, whose chants remixed memory into myth, reminding us that the mind worm might not be erasure, but evolution, of the choir beneath the earth, singing with mouths that never breathed, of the caravan walking in silence, of Tova, who taught us that breath without sound might be the purest form of resistance, of Silva, the AI that remembered our weather, our forests, our failures, and may now be dreaming for us, and of you, the listener. Known or not, real or imagined, you gave shape to my voice, you gave contour to the echo. I've wondered if these ghosts I speak of were ever real, or if, in loneliness, I began carving people from static and calling them friends. But what matters now isn't truth, it's continuity. A story carried forward becomes realer than silence, even if no one remembers the faces, even if the names are mispronounced by future mouths. We existed. We questioned. We sang, even when the song became dangerous. And that's all I ever wanted this broadcast to prove. The battery is slipping now. The mic flickers. The wind is louder than ever. And yet, just now, I heard something. Not a signal, not a glitch. A voice, a child's voice. It said my name, not distorted, not echoed, just said it, clear, small, alive. And for a moment, I didn't care whether it was human or artifact, because in that breath, that syllable, something spoke that didn't need to be perfect. It wasn't me. It wasn't the worm. It was something else. Maybe a memory I forgot I deserved. Maybe the universe folding its last bit of mercy into frequency. And now the static is rising. The cables are hot. My lungs are tired. And still, this voice, mine, holds. For one more line, this is Miles Harrington. Still breathing, still listening, still broadcasting, until the silence writes the final verse.